Okay. Welcome, Tony, and welcome everyone who is listening today to our recording of a 30-minute memoir. My name is Nicole Gillen, and as with all these recordings that we're doing, we're trying to keep this around 30 minutes in length because we don't all have a lot of time, but it's important to hear people's stories. And so today we're going to talk to Tony and hear his story. But before we even get there, let me take a little step back, introduce myself. I'm a caregiver. I have a daughter with schizophrenia. And when we started on this journey a little over 4 years ago, I saw what it did to her, obviously. And then I struggled as her caregiver to get my arms around how to best help her. So I wrote a book. I wrote a book which is really targeted for caregivers. But today we're not talking about my book. We're going to talk about concepts that my book covers, but the reality is there's so much to potentially talk about. So we really try to whittle it down to one topic area, and we're going to get into that here shortly. I also realized in the process of writing this book how little voice there is of this community in general. And Tony is so appropriate to talk about that voice, given what he's written with his book. And I wanted to open it up to this conversation of the good, the bad, and the ugly of managing this disease. In these calls, I hope to shed light on not just the challenges, but really the resilience of people just like Tony in this community, to show the victories and those moments of success despite all the challenges. So let me go ahead. I'm just going to share my screen for a quick second here, where what I want to do is level set with everyone on what we're going to be talking about. So as I said, this is a 30-minute memoir. And, in this world of bipolar, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, let's talk about what it means to each person individually in this fireside chat approach. So today is Tony Roberts. Tony is an author and a mental health advocate. As you can see here, he has 2 decades in pastoral ministry, which I think he's going to help talk about a little bit more today, while battling bipolar. He's written 2 books. The first book is When Despair Meets Delight, is his personal memoir. It's his journey. And the most recent book that I'm hoping he'll touch on today is his collaboration called Hope for Troubled Minds, which has been called an essential read by Pulitzer Prize winner Ron Powers. So really powerful, powerful stuff. So what's Tony going to talk about today? What's our focus? Our focus is on communication. It's on the definitions. There's a lot of big words in this space that people use, and why do we need to know them? And how he has gone about communicating about this illness and what it has meant to him, his family, and his friends. So that's all I'm going to do in terms of a deck, right? So 2 slides, boom, we're done. Now it's time to really get into the heart of today's discussion. So I'm going to try to put myself on mute. Tony, I'm going to give you the floor so everyone can understand who you are and what your journey has been. Can I hear?
Well,
can you hear
thank you,
me?
Nicole, for having me. My name is Tony Robert. I hear you. Can you hear me? You're frozen.
Am I back? I can see you. Technology working at its best. Are you still there, Tony?
I hear you. Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, no problem.
I'm having you're frozen. Your image is frozen, but I hear you, Nicole.
All right, maybe we should go off video for a minute to see if that helps with some of the bandwidth issues.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, no problem.
Okay. Well, my name is Tony Roberts. I have a diagnosis of rapid cycling bipolar disorder 1 with psychotic features and mixed states. But that's not all that I am. I grew up in Indiana, Hoosier State. I was a top scholar athlete in my class. I was able, even though I had some symptoms of psychosis, hearing voices, I was able to function at a high level. Attended college at Hanover College. Was given a tour by Mike Pence and acted on the same stage as Woody Harrelson. Um, I went to seminary in Louisville, Kentucky, and as Nicole has said, served 20 years in the pastoral ministry while battling my bipolar diagnosis. We're talking about communications, so the one phrase in as a man of faith, I have this phrase: speak the truth in love. And I think the challenge for those of us with um, serious mental illness and our loved ones is to speak our story, tell our story in ways that can you hear me now?
Yes, you're doing great.
Okay. With mental illness, it's important to speak precisely what our experience is without watering down uh, the language we speak or making it uh, possible for others to stigmatize us overly. Uh, so with the language that we speak. Um, I like to say that I have a brain illness because that's very precise with schizophrenia, schizoaffective, bipolar, and major depression. We have an abnormality in our brain that can be detected in a scan. Um, and it's more than just a behavioral issue or a mental illness. Um, I have tried in my 20 years of ministry and since then being a mental health minister, I advocate uh, to to share my story in the hopes that others will be inspired and informed to share their stories and hopefully with time and um, understanding, we can give people a sense of what we are going through and make it possible to function at our highest level. There's a lot of obstacles in the way of getting people to communicate with respect and speak the truth in love, as I say. Um, and a lot there is a lot of misunderstanding even in the advocacy community to getting people um, uh, aware uh, of our struggle, but also encouraging us to function at our best. Um, I have recently written a book with with a lot of collaborators, over almost 100 collaborators, called Hope for Troubled Minds, tributes to those with brain illnesses and their loved ones. And it is a book designed to advocate by sharing our stories. And I think loved ones like Nicole and many others I have met are critical to sharing the story that, that is possible, that we can advocate and for our loved ones, and then the loved ones themselves as well advocate for um, for ourselves. And I'm going on a book tour to share this story in Indiana and Kentucky, coming up here in a couple of weeks in April.
So Tony, let me ask you a question. You have built a career as a minister and as somebody who's written books on communication. But in this space of serious mental illness, have there been times where you really struggled to communicate your needs, communicate what's happening? When has communication failed you?
Yeah, it is very true that, I call it my brain betrays me. There's times when I'm in an episode where either I'm manic and have a hard time understanding my limits and overestimate what I can do and wind up falling short, or if I'm depressed and I have a hard time getting out of bed and uh, don't really want to communicate with anyone. um, I have found it always best to, like I said, speak the truth in love. If we are feeling depressed or manic, over the years I've come to be able to identify that and name it. Um, and I've been given grace that I haven't uh, kept my illness a secret, which is something some people feel obliged to do because they're afraid. Rightly so, they're afraid of being discriminated against. I've been blessed through no goodness of my own, but just being fortunate that when I have communicated my needs and my illness, uh, people who who are close to me understand and advocate for me when I can't advocate for myself.
So that's interesting. Let me ask you this then. Are there specific techniques, communication techniques or strategies that you have found helpful when you were struggling to communicate? Are there, whether it was writing it down or texting it to someone or whatever, like, were there techniques that helped you get through that process?
Yes, both of those you mentioned, writing and texting. One thing I do a lot with my professional providers, my psych nurse practitioner and my therapist, I use the portal that they provide to, in between appointments, write down exactly what my episodes are like. And because, as you might imagine, like with a psych nurse practitioner, seeing her maybe every other month for 15 minutes or 20 minutes, uh, I can only capture a snapshot. But the portal of written communication, I'm fortunate that I that I have a gift as a writer. But even if you aren't a professional writer, just sharing your experience in writing can help a great deal, and you become better capable of expressing your needs to either a loved one. Again, I'm fortunate. My sister is a psych nurse, and she often will guide me in between appointments, and then through the portal, if you can get your prescribers and therapists to respond to that, in between appointments and then at your appointments as well.
Yeah. So one of the techniques is the writing is obviously an important one that you've really kind of latched onto in a number of levels, right? It's advocating for yourself, but then it's also the sort of broader advocacy that you're doing in your books. What areas of communication today would you like to improve on or develop further?
Well, I think, for myself, first, I would say that, I would like to be able to um, express myself in um, in words as well as writing. I'm going on a speaking tour, and I have a great deal of anxiety about speaking in front of people. Even when I was a pastor, I had anxiety about delivering sermons. I feel like I can do a much better job writing them down. So it helps me to write manuscripts and then deliver those manuscripts. Hopefully I'll be present enough with the people that I will hear me, so that I don't have to, be wooden or reading it while I'm with them. I would say, I would love to see more people, and that was one of the goals of our book, Hope for Troubled Minds. Uh, People who did submit letters, poems, or song lyrics, many of them have said to me that, just the process of expressing themselves on these very difficult topics, whether it be a diagnosis that that they've had or a loved one, was very healing. It was, writing it to me is the cheapest and the most effective form of therapy we have available. It's certainly important to have a therapist and a psych nurse practitioner or a psychiatrist, but um, you know, even writing it to them is a very effective way. But in my career, I'm turning 60 in June, and I would like to feel more confident in my speaking abilities as well.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. So, given your history and everything you've done with the books and with your career and everything else, you talked about your ability to articulate what's happening with you. What advice would you give to someone who struggles with some form of a serious mental illness, either for that person who struggles with it or for the caregiver when it comes to communication?
Well, I think that, two things I would say. The first is listening, listening to what others are saying about their own struggles, but also listening to yourself and what what is going through your mind and heart, It's a struggle if you have psychotic symptoms because uh, sometimes I hear voices internally. There are many others who hear voices externally, um, and you've got to sort of develop the discipline to screen out the negative voices and the voices that are detrimental to your well-being. Um, but it's important to listen to the needs of your heart and your mind. Um, Listening to your loved ones. Uh, if you have a diagnosis, if you don't, your loved ones is essential. Um, and I think also reading is something, Stephen King, I think it was, that says if you want to be a better writer, first you need to be a better reader. Um, and I think one thing that's greatly helped me has been reading books like memoirs. When I was first diagnosed, I read K. Redfield Jamison's An Unquiet Mind, which is still
Oh,
at
yeah.
the top of my list for memoirs of someone with an illness, with a brain illness, bipolar. She calls it manic depression, and it's uh, it's important to develop a language for ourselves if we will read the stories of others.
So all of that makes sense. The thing that as a caregiver, I think about when my daughter was in psychosis and, she struggled to read. She struggled to, sort of think logically, rationally, sequentially. All right, now I think I have the bad internet connection. Well, anyways, as I was saying, my daughter struggled to process information, to articulate information, to really I don't advocate's not even the right word, right? Because she just couldn't really communicate with me at all. So how, as her caregiver, what I did was I over communicated. Not shocking. Have you sort of seen the same thing? Did you see your family try to over communicate with you when you had moments where you were struggling?
Yeah, I think it was different for me because I was 30 when my illness became debilitating. Prior to that, I was higher functioning, so I didn't experience that with my family of origin, but certainly in my marriages, I've been married twice, and it became problematic when uh, when my symptoms would be getting in the way of effective and uh, caring and intimate uh, communication with my spouse. And there were moments when my spouse's, but by virtue of um uh, necessity, uh, had to overfunction when I was in the hospital, or when certain things were transpiring that made it difficult, if not impossible, to communicate. Like I said, I was still the full time breadwinner in our family, as a pastor, and there were moments that I was inpatient, in the hospital, and my wife at the time had to uh, be kind of a go-between for me in communicating to the church and my leadership, uh, and did her best, but it was, it is such a difficult brain illness. Bipolar and schizophrenia and is, are just very, very problematic.
Yeah, they really are. Well, one final question, then we'll start to get into our wrap-up questions. So, looking at the mental health care professional, what advice would you give to a mental health care professional when it comes to communicating with someone who has one of these brain illnesses?
Well, the best providers I've had were flexible with me and gave me avenues for communication, like writing in a portal or having on call. My current provider is part of a network of telehealth. It's through telehealth, and I've been able to function well enough that I can do telehealth effectively. And if something transpires between appointments and I'm not able to get immediately a response from my primary provider prescriber, someone else on staff is on call, and I've gotten within a day a response from my the team of caregivers. I think also, and this goes for you and all the care, the immediate loved ones. Uh, you know, it, Brain illness, mental health is a lot different than physical health in some respects, and the loved ones sometimes see things more clearly, or at least as clearly as the people with the diagnosis. And I think providers need to recognize that and listen carefully to loved ones. I know that HIPAA handcuffs make it very difficult to communicate, to say the least. But a caring provider should always be open to loved ones' input. They may not be able to say back to them, what the treatment plan is, but they should always accept the input and have that factor into the treatment.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. So let me ask you this. What do you wish, looking back when you first started, what do you wish you'd known? Is there one or two things that stick out that you wish someone had told you, that you wish was available? Anything?
Well, I think, I was diagnosed in 1995 as a 30-year-old. And at the time, I was fortunate that my psychiatrist at the hospital, who became my primary psychiatrist, handed me the book, An Unquiet Mind, K. Redfield Jameson. I think since then, in the 30 years that have transpired, there are a lot more memoirs. There's a lot more, even from my point of view, faith-based resources. So I think I wish in 1995 I would have tapped into the broad range of written, and with, NAMI has grown, you know, substantially, and Treatment Advocacy Center and other advocacy groups. Um, uh, and I wish I had more of that when I started this journey. And I'm grateful that those organizations and individuals who were pioneers of that stuck it out, and became a resource for those of us with a diagnosis.
So that moving forward, now looking at where you are, what are you hungry for? What information are you trying to really get your arms around?
Well, what I would really like to see is more cooperation between the organizations. Sometimes I saw this a lot in churches. Sometimes we compete with one another for the the people and the resources that we feel we most need to do our niche. And one of the things we've done with Hope for Troubled Minds that I hope will become kind of like a standard, the monies that are net proceeds from Hope for Troubled Minds will go both to NAMI, Treatment Advocacy Center, and our faith-based nonprofit, Delight in Disorder Ministries. And I'm hoping that, beyond financial resources, that we will see a lot more cooperation between, people out there in the field, on the front lines, and those who are, have more resources that they can tap into in advocacy as well. And I certainly hope that we make greater strides than we've made in the level of, you know, the criminalization of mentally ill, the homelessness dilemma, the pipeline, as they call it, from um, psych discharges to street to jails and prisons. We've got a long way to go with that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, there's no doubt there. So okay. As we've discussed previously, one of the things that I like to try to do is to just wrap up with a positive statement. For me, my positive statement is that there are people like you who get it firsthand, who have written meaningful, you know, uh, unusual books, right? It's not necessarily like your Hope for Troubled Minds. It's not. I wouldn't call it a memoir, but it is a memoir in a weird way. But it's the kind of thing that really gives people light and inspiration. So that's my positive statement. Do you have a positive statement?
Yes, I think what I am encouraged by is that there are people, I come from a faith-based perspective, and the church historically, if you date back all the way to other centuries, has really missed the boat in, uh, uh, you know, the care and treatment of those with mental illness. There have been exceptions. Dorothea Dix was part of a faith-based movement, and she was instrumental in getting more humane care. Um, but as an institution, the church has fallen behind, and I'm encouraged by people within the church and within faith-based, synagogues and mosques who are starting to get it more, and they're opening their doors to, on our tour, I'm speaking at 3 churches and a seminary. So the faith-based world is starting to listen more and learn from people with brain illnesses and their loved ones. And I think that will, filter out better care, not just for the people in the pews, but in, the people uh, in the world who can benefit from what faith and spirituality can provide.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. It's a really nice way to say it. So I know we are about out of time, and my internet has been completely unhelpful the entire time. So I'm going to go ahead and conclude today's call. Tony, thank you so very much for your time. And I'm disappointed that my internet was so fussy, but hopefully I think it was a great conversation, and I really appreciate all of your ideas and wisdom and experience. So thank you.
Thank you for having me, Nicole.